I do think I have a legitimate scoop, but let me just set up the basic context and background, then we will get to the good stuff. I will say this may be possible major spoilers for future storylines of House of the Dragon. If you don't want to have any spoilers for House of the Dragon, then don't listen. If you're okay with some potential spoilers, then please listen on. So, for those totally uninitiated, the basic backdrop of House of the Dragon is this Targaryen civil war with Rhaenyra and Alicent going to war with one another and different factions taking sides, some siding with Rhaenyra, some siding with Alicent. And the way it's being presented is it's a frankly brutal power politics conflict between these warring houses and ruling elites. But, and I want to keep this vague, one of the actresses did sort of hint at a potential huge spoiler on, I guess, the TikTok. I want to be careful. I don't want to be quoted absolutely because this is a little on the edge in terms of whether this is a spoiler or not. It seems pretty obvious, but she did confirm, yes, they were thinking and talking about this in the writer's room. So what is it? Well, it may not be much of a spoiler or scoop, but apparently, yes, it is confirmed that either Rhaenyra and or Alicent or both are bisexual. In other words, this may not be strictly speaking a political conflict, but romance was involved on either one side or both sides. In terms of what we're presented, that both characters are strictly heterosexual, that may not be true. Now, we've already gotten hints of this if you looked at some of the teasers and some of the promos where one of the actresses went on of how emotional the Targaryens are.
And emotional. They're so emotional.
Yeah.
And they can't talk to each other.
They're quite a cross family, deep down.
They are.
I think they need a great deal of therapy.
And the actress herself identifies as not binary. Now, that's the actress, that's not the character. Want to be careful there. But there probably are a little clues and hints that things are not occurring for the reasons we think are occurring. Some things are pretty valid, that Daemon wants power, right? He's trying to take the dragon egg. He wants to carve out the kingdom for himself. That seems pretty safe. That seems to follow the books. No problem there. But again, George has pulled the trigger that the series is not canonical. It is drifting away from the canonical sources. And the canon doesn't really answer definitively what the source of the rivalry is beyond the politics. It just seems it was a purely political conflict. Alicent was favored at the court. She wanted her son to rule. Rhaenyra has her own ideas. They both have sons who they name Aegon. So it just seems an inevitable conflict based on division of power. Nothing romantic explicitly occurring, but one of the younger actresses did say, yes, they have talked about that, what do you want to call it, lesbonic potential between the characters, and that how this friendship soured possibly due to the romance failing or succeeding, or maybe one person being attracted, the other person not being attracted, and so on and so forth. In terms of the wider canon, we kind of know this, right? The Targaryens are kind of notorious for incest, outrageous sexual desires. It is also canonical with a lot of characters like Cersei, Daenerys, and so on and so forth. If you've read the books or some of the short stories or just the, whatever you want to call it, extended universe of the Gurmverse or the Song of Ice and Fire, whatever we want to call this. But again, they didn't really show that in Game of Thrones with on the television show or even in some of the wider media. It's sort of censored certain parts of the characters. People have gotten a sort of distorted idea of Game of Thrones being mainly heterosexual love affairs. No, there is some, although admittedly weak, representation of other genders. The books are much more explicit and go much more depth. And George, whatever you want to say, was far-seeing and did have these kind of relationships represented. Will they replicate that in House of the Dragon? Again, I can only go with the scoop. Did confirm they're talking about it. Will they actually put it into the plot lines? Will it be a part of the major twists? Don't know, can't say, can't completely confirm, but it is up in the air. So if you were coming into the show thinking this is a primarily political conflict, apparently not. Romance and or sex and desire is a big part of it, and that may have been the trigger for certain events. It may also explain certain twists or contrivances that may come up with Daemon or some of the other characters in terms of their love affairs, or why are they with that person? Wouldn't it be more logical or more politically correct for them to have this relationship? This may explain the gap or why certain things happened the way they did, which is definitely an interesting twist. Will this make for a better story or worse story? That I'm a little torn on because I gotta be honest, in terms of the wider media environment, I am kind of joining, I don't want to call it the right wing side, but I guess the more skeptical side of suddenly turning a lot of canonical characters or characters we thought were canonically one thing, another thing, and just keep on doing it, making Spider-Man gay, Superman gay, Moon Knight gay, everything's gay. Almost everyone's gay now. Everybody has a bisexual, lesbian, non-binary. Again, onto itself, I have no issue with it, but now it's becoming a massive trend all over the place. It's getting a little silly and tiresome. It does make sense in terms of, yes, the wider history. There was very little to no lesbian representation, no gay representation, nor representation beyond heterosexuality. Yes, I understand all that. Some cases it makes sense. That's actually the original intent of the creator, like George Martin, right? He had that in the books, but they didn't show that. So some of this is correcting past errors or past omissions by other creators. You also have to be honest, it could just be a lot of silly political correctness going on now. So we'll have to wait and see whether this pans out, whether they even pull the trigger on this relationship, and whether that will be good or bad for the story and or for the fiction. So a lot of unanswered questions, but if you were curious for some of the plot twists that will happen, wait, whoa, how did that happen? They apparently are teasing it here and there if you know where to look. So there we are. And it has been confirmed by one of the younger actresses. But take it for what you will. Maybe she was just misunderstanding what some of the writers were talking about. But apparently they are thinking about this in the background of making this a kind of lesbian bisexual relationship. We'll have to wait and see.